there's not been a lot of news that's gone on since the last sort of podcasts, but there are a couple of things. One particular thing that has been announced this week that I feel like we have to discuss.
Okay.
And that is that in the world of video games, we do talk about games occasionally on this show. CD Projekt Red announced that the next Witcher game is in development.
I forgot about that. I did forget about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I mean, we got a nice little image of like a Lynx pendant thing in snow.
Good.
And that's about all we know. The rest of it is for like investors and new employees and all that stuff. So it's really nothing to do with us.
Well,
really
I for
nothing
one
to
think
talk
that
about.
image proves it's going to be the greatest game of all time.
I think so too. I think that's probably pretty good.
Let's be honest.
We do know that they're not using the Unreal. Well, no, sorry, they're not using the Red Engine.
Oh yeah, they're using Unreal 5.
Unreal Engine 5.
Yeah,
which
pretty
is
crazy.
That's going to be kind of cool to see what they pull off.
Well, it just means maybe Cyberpunk won't happen again.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
like, let's be honest. This
Maybe.
reveal
Let's not
would have been way more hyped if Cyberpunk was actually good. Like everyone would have been like, "Oh my god!" After the Cyberpunk being so fucking good, best game ever. Now The Witcher has been announced. Holy shit!
Yeah,
But-
7 years away.
George, if Cyberpunk had done well, they wouldn't have had to announce The Witcher this far out when they had nothing to show. The only
That's true.
reason they did this was to get good faith back. You see the way their Twitter account used to reply, the most arrogant replies about how fucking good they are, and it came across as like they just get the community and they just know what we want and they're all about us, like that engagement they had. And you see them back in the replies now answering questions the same way again. I'm like, why the fuck are you doing this again? And
Dare
people
you
are
answer
falling
questions,
for
you
it.
fuck.
People are falling for it.
Well,
People
I
are like,
don't-
oh my god, this is going to be awesome, oh blah blah blah,
Ugh.
and I'm like, no,
I won't fall for it.
They're gonna absolutely drop this ball.
And
What
most-
I don't understand, right, is why this is like a common thing for games to get announced before there is even a game now. Like they go, we're working on the next Witcher game. It's like, great, that just completely ruined the surprise.
Yeah.
It's because
7
you're
years
only
time,
as
we're sat there, we get a trailer. It's like, holy fuck, I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah.
But it's
You know?
recency bias. When it comes to company opinions from the public, recency bias is everything. The last story is the only story. So if you've been in the news about negative things, that's the only story about you. You need to change the narrative. That's all they're doing. CD Projekt Red are announcing a game so early in development. We're not going to see this game. It's not coming out for 5 years from now. It's not
Probably,
coming
yeah.
out anytime soon.
Well, I'm gonna
We
be
won't
26.
see a trailer for 2 more years. We won't see even a teaser trailer for 2 more years, at least. The only reason they announced this was to change the narrative about the company for the next few years.
Yeah.
And that can be not just for public opinion, but it can also be for investors and for money. They're
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
to
for
develop a game right now. They need money, they need finances, and they need to show that people will be hyped for the next
like,
Witcher.
look how hyped everyone is for Witcher.
Exactly. This is literally for business and business only so they can get money to develop this game. That is the reason they've announced it now, because they've lost developers, they've lost great creative people within their team from what has happened after The Witcher 3 and the development of Cyberpunk. And
Yeah, I
now
mean,
they've
most,
done this to get money out of investors and sponsors so that they can make their next game and get a positive reaction from an audience. That's my take.
No,
Yeah,
no,
no,
I
I
think
think
that's,
right.
I think that's
Definitely
right.
right.
I see your point. Like, I think I always thought it was like two things. It was forget about the Cyberpunk, everything's good. But I also found it really funny how they had to explain in the article that they posted that the Red Engine will still be used for the development of the Cyberpunk expansion, as if that was something people were worried about.
Yeah.
As if suddenly they make an expansion for a game and a completely different engine just because. I
As
thought
you're traveling through the cyberpunk world, you go into the expansion area and everything just changes. And you're like, what
it's
is
just
happening?
a different engine. What the fuck?
I can't wait till there's the Cyberpunk
it
is a
just
great
crashes
game
the
Twitter that
game.
appears in 2 years' time. And it's just
I-
some
I-
little
I-
Cyberpunk cult.
I found it just a little bit like maybe maybe it's mostly tailored towards getting those investors in, and also if they wanted to do like a recruitment drive to get the staff to actually make the fucking product that doesn't exist yet. But I still find it a little frustrating because it's not the only company that does this. Of late. Rockstar did it, where they announced that the next Grand Theft Auto is in active development. It's like, well, cool, but also why are you announcing that now?
Because Red Dead Redemption Online is getting so much fucking negative feedback, and they're trying to change the narrative.
Oh, so they're trying to change the narrative, but I don't understand why later on down the line will that narrative matter if they surprise us with something that's like, bam, that's awesome, or if but
we don't know what's going on behind the scenes with them now that we never see in the public eye, and it's usually involving money. It's usually involving partnerships, and that could be with Sony, a Microsoft, or anyone that helps fund these companies. Rockstar is an independent publisher. They have investors. And when they're in early development of any game, there's literally people like finance companies that invest in these game developers when games start development that help like fund this stuff. That's how this stuff works, especially for the more independent studios that aren't necessarily a Sony or a Microsoft that have the big money backing. There's investors and financial institutions that get involved in this.
So it's more so in these companies that are more independent. They have to make a more public outcry for it.
It even happens with Ubisoft. It even happens with EA. And it's a lot of it's a narrative change. Look at Mass Effect. The last Mass Effect was terrible, and they then had to announce the new Mass Effect like 4-5 years before we're going to hear anything else about it.
Yeah, and then they removed the trailer from the internet.
Tell me one time this has happened.
Wait, they did?
After...
the trailer got taken down. I don't understand why, but
that's not a terrible sign. That is a terrible sign for development.
It's one thing to like announce just like the games in development. I think it's another thing to have like some random, maybe completely irrelevant CG trailer whipped up, because one of those makes you feel things, and the other one's just like, oh, cool.
Well, the only time I've seen a game like that's always had positive reactions, or like when it came out, it had like positive feedback, and the audience was happy. But it almost never happens. There's only one time where the company will announce like, oh, in development super, super early. It's always because the last game is negative and they're trying to create positive feedback and control the narrative. And that could be for a multitude of reasons, whether that simply be about the fan reaction and getting fan loyalty back, or to stay relevant in the news, or to do with financing said development of the game. The only time I've seen it when it's a positive game is Kingdom Hearts 3, and that's because the development cycle was so enormously long. Square Enix are famous for it, partly because their development cycles are so long. It doesn't happen. We didn't hear about Horizon Forbidden West until it was way in development, and we're at least a year or two away from it. And the same with the new God of War. Like most of these games, when they're doing well, we don't need to hear about it. It's when we hear about it so far out, it's to change the narrative, it's to change the story, it's to get backing from fans and finances.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm really excited.
It does make sense
for Assassin's Creed Rift. So you're wrong.
Okay.
Shut the fuck up. What I'm trying to say is, I guess I'm a little expecting. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm a little bit mad at the knock-on effect of shit games. You know?
Yeah, I think that's
it
been the
ruins
case
everything.
for like the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But now that I'm at a point where I can recognise what is actually an effect of a shit game. Going forward beyond the shit game, it takes the fun out of everything else, because now they're like Tyler said, they're changing the narrative. They've got to announce a game before they've even got a fucking game, and that completely ruins that like feeling of, you know, that anticipation you get when there is actually something to be excited about. Because now I don't give a shit.
True,
I'm looking at a fucking Witcher
like,
pendant, going, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like what. It's like, well done, I guess.
Like, I'm always going to be sort of excited about the prospect of a new Witcher game, but like,
when there is one, but there isn't.
At the end of the day,
So,
it's a stupid picture. It's like, it's nothing.
It's not a stupid
the fun
picture.
in
It's
it,
cool.
though,
It's just
It's stupid.
5 years
talk about
too
it.
soon.
Like, I enjoyed that, like, on Discord and on Twitter, so people were talking about The Witcher, and it was fun to speculate and be like, oh, I wonder what they're going to do. Like, it was just fun for it to be relevant for a little bit, and I enjoyed that. Obviously, like, you're completely right as to why they've done this, and it is, would I prefer waiting and then having a trailer close to release? Like, yeah, obviously, but I think also I don't care that
you're not
much,
waiting until you know. You know,
It's
you're not
like-
waiting at all until you know it's happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Like how
But I think-
we literally got done in by Bethesda with Starfield and the Elder Scrolls 6 because Fallout 76 was such a fucking disaster.
Elder Scrolls 6
That was
trailer,
such a
and it's
fucking
just fucking.
disaster.
I hate the Elder
That
Scrolls
is
6
the
trailer.
prime example of this very problem.
Yeah.
The Elder Scrolls 6, that random CG trailer that
Fucking
shot
hell.
fuck all.
It's that game's not
being
even gonna look
announced
like
because
that.
It was
hey
so
guys,
fun, though.
forget about Fallout. Yeah, but that's because they showed something that wasn't a fucking news article, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
guess so.
Maybe
It was
there's a
nice
little
'cause it
bit
was
of
the
magic
event,
in
You
that.
had the music. It was like, it's just fun.
Announcement,
It was
I don't
fun
know.
in the
There was a bit
moment.
of
It was
care.
fun in the moment.
It
But
was
the
fun.
idea of it.
This
The idea of it.
This isn't even that. You know what I mean? This isn't even that because it's just an article that says, we're happy to announce the next installment of the Witcher series of video games is currently in development, kicking off a new saga for the franchise. Oh, by the way, we're still using the Red Engine for Cyberpunk's DLC in case you were worried. But also,
I'm
we're
really
using the
worried.
Unreal Engine for this. Please give us money and forget about Cyberpunk. That's what
Yeah,
that
it's
says.
true.
The
It's
video
true.
game industry will never forget about Cyberpunk. As much as they want to try and be like, oh, don't worry about that, guys. We're moving on to new, bigger ventures. Nobody's going to forget about it.
The video.
Even
I've
if The Witcher
never felt-
4 is incredible, they've got to like do consecutively 2 really good games. I think
Yeah.
for CD
I'm
Projekt
gonna
Red to be back
deliberately
in every
find
one.
a way
I
to get
think
cancer
Cyberpunk's
just
the
to see if it
greatest.
cures it.
I think Cyberpunk's the greatest flop in video game history. I really
One
do.
of them, for
Yeah.
sure.
I really do, and it's
It's
not
up
just
there
about
with,
how
like, No
badly
Man's
it
Sky.
flopped, but like the
No
hype
Man's
surrounding
Sky.
Cyberpunk, I think, was past No Man's Sky.
Yeah, I think
Like
it
I
was
think
as well.
it was more so. I think like literally, I had people that don't talk to me ever about video
Cyber
games
No Man's
talking
Punk.
to me about video games. Oh, dude, I want to get the Cyberpunk game. Have you heard about that? Are you into that? Because they know I do this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And they never talk to me about games, but they were talking about Cyberpunk. Everyone I know was talking about fucking Cyberpunk. And it came out, and it was the biggest fucking disaster I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's just not good. I'm not a fan of Cyberpunk. I mean, I tried to play it when they did that. They released the next gen versions, if you will, if we want to call them that, and they gave out like 5-hour trials, so you could just like play 5 hours of the game, see if you like. It's the same fucking game. It just doesn't have the glitches anymore, so it's boring. You know, there is nothing
exactly,
else
that's
going
what I
on.
found.
When's the Witcher 3 remaster coming out? I thought that was meant to come
I
out
don't
last
know.
year.
They delayed it indefinitely, so we don't know. It's this year.
What the fuck is wrong with them, man?
I think it's been outsourced, so it's not something that, you know, is going to necessarily conflict with anything else that they're doing.
I should've got
So
Blue
I don't
Point
think
to do
there's
it.
anything to worry about. Yeah, exactly. So
Blue Point are the best remasterers.
I don't know who's doing it. All I know is that it's not necessarily. They're not necessarily working on that in tandem per se. It's just not what's going on.
Yeah.
It's its own thing. Maybe it will drop when it's ready, and maybe that will be okay. But we already know that The Witcher 3 is a great game. So what will it prove?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, it's just like.
Yeah.
That's
It'll be
the
fun
thing,
to
unfortunately,
revisit,
with this you have to be careful about, is it will release, and there will be an entire, like, sect of people on, say, Twitter going, oh, this is great, can't wait for The Witcher 4. But what they don't realise is that's the same game that released before Cyberpunk, just with the obvious remastering, and that it doesn't actually mean anything for the future of The Witcher or the future of CD Projekt.
Because it's a different
and they
engine,
just go,
different writers,
this exists, so...
different dev team.
You know, it's just like-
I mean, it hasn't like most of the team that worked on The Witcher 3 left CD Projekt Red by this point. I remember reading
Isn't that
that.
because
A
they
lot
got
of them have.
crunched
A lot of
out
them
of
have.
their brains?
Yeah.
You know, isn't that
Yeah.
because they're like they sort of, it was such a like a big project that they were just there.
Yeah.
And it didn't really feel personal to them. Like they were just working on this or that. It was never anything major, and they didn't. It wasn't really like a big thing until the game was like finished. You know, and it didn't feel personal to any of them. So they're like, well, fuck this then. You know.
Yeah.
And I suppose there are some. If you look into it, there are some like little horror stories about CD Projekt and the workplace there when it comes to, you know, the product versus the input, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So these employees may not feel the magic that we do when we play The Witcher 3 because they helped make it in such a way where it felt like a factory assembly.
Yeah.
And I feel, and I'll imagine Cyberpunk was like the opportunity to maybe do something more, and in the end, the soul of that got sucked out. Just it happened for us as well.
Yeah, true.
Soulless
And so-
is a good word for it. Like it's the
Yeah.
like when a game's special, you feel like it was special when it was being made. Like, it translates from development into the player's hands. That's what Horizon Forbidden West did, for example. Like, when you're playing that feels like soul and love was put into that.
Yeah.
And then you play
it had love, care, and
Cyberpunk.
attention.
Yeah, exactly. You play a
Body
Cyberpunk,
fluids.
and it's soulless. It's soulless.
See, I've not played Cyberpunk.
It's very miserable.
I've never even loaded the game up. Not the old one, not the next gen version. Like I don't really know much about it.
It was kind of funny when it was broken to fuck. I will not lie. But it's very much so at its core not the game that was promised. So it doesn't matter how much they polish the problems that the game has. There are so many things that were marketed and advertised that the game simply does not have.
Yeah.
I couldn't give examples off the top of my head because it's not something that I particularly care about right now. It's not like something where I'm thinking, oh, this is where Cyberpunk really let me down. It's like, no, it just let me down across the board, and I haven't really given a shit since.
Yeah.
So for the most part, the problem with Cyberpunk isn't the glitches. The glitches were just funny, silly. That hopefully they were to get patched, and they did. But they got patched. But the things that were promised are still not in the game.
Yeah.
So Cyberpunk is still not the game it was promised, and because it's also not hilariously fucked, it's not actually that entertaining to play because all you're doing is running around in this shell of an open world doing fuck all.
Yeah, I just remember that original CGI trailer for the game where it's got like that woman
in 2013.
Yeah, and shit, her arms are all like folded out, and they've got those blades coming out of them and shit. Like that was always so cool to me. I was always expecting this really cool Cyberpunk universe, and it's just like, it just seems like from what I've seen of Cyberpunk, it's just like Fallout set in a city. That's what it looks to me.
Well, what they've done is, and there's a really good video from Luke
in terms of
Stevens
gameplay,
on this,
anyway.
is that the way that they've built this game is they've used the exact same design philosophy from The Witcher, and it does not apply to Night City correctly.
No.
Because when you look at the way they've done it, it feels like you're playing The Witcher, but the setting just doesn't allow for it to, like, it doesn't apply. It's like a really weird translation of, like, design philosophy in terms of building your game world.
Yeah.
And he made a really good video on it, and it's a good analysis of it. And it gives me some sort of, like... So it indicates to me that they still know how to make a Witcher. And I think if the design philosophy carries over to The Witcher 4 and they have good stories, then their design philosophy hasn't wavered. They just applied it to like a completely just the wrong genre and wrong setting. And they thought if they just did The Witcher again in Cyberpunk, it would work, and it just didn't work.
No.
I don't remember getting 100 phone calls in The Witcher going, I've got a job for you. In like about 15 minutes.
But
in about 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Samurai.
there's definitely other issues. But I mean, I think there's something that's interesting. Is the lead director of The Witcher 4, whatever they're going to call it, it was also the lead director of the Gwent game. So
it's going to be banging.
That bodes very well.
Oh no!
What?
And I'm looking forward to, maybe 10 times more Gwent.
Well, the Gwent is going to be good.
Lucky. Yeah, exactly. We know the Gwent's going to be good, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Every single open world RPG that has a mini game that just consumes your life for a few hours is going to be good somehow.
Exactly.
It's
like how
even
Final
if you're not a
Fantasy...
fan of that mini game that will consume your life for hours, it's going to be good because, well, it's got a mini game in it that can consume your life for hours.
It's a perfectly good analysis there, Ethan.
In depth.
But that's what it does. That's what it does.
It's like anything.
There's even a fucking like mini game like that in Horizon, isn't there?
Yeah, it's I like that. I like Machine Strike, and I like Triple Triad from Final Fantasy 14.
Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, it's also
Triple
very
Triad's
good. There's many great fucking games in these RPGs, and I hope there's Gwent in The Witcher 4.